Welcome, everyone. It's lovely to see you all, and many long-time friends, and maybe one or two new folks. And if you are new, welcome, a very warm welcome to you. This is our Sunday morning class, which has been on Zoom for, what is it now? Almost a year and a half, isn't it? 15 or 16 months at least. I think I remember the first one we did was back in March of 2020. And it's great to be able to have folks from far off. Ursula in Zurich, and Kerry in Saskatoon in Canada, and Stephanie in Naples, Florida, Linnea in Spokane. Good to see you. And Melinda in Vermont, Diane in North Carolina, and any other more distant folks from us. Siobhan in Connecticut, and welcome, and Heather, of course, Heather in Maine. Hi, Heather. Good to see you. Good to see everyone. Sorry if I'm missing anyone who's from out of the area, and everyone here in the DC and Maryland, Virginia area. So good to be back, and I think for most of you know, this is I'm Hugh Byrne, and I teach with the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, which is the overall sponsor of the class, and also with the Center for Mindful Living, which is part of IMCW and is a physical space in Northwest DC in Tenleytown, which we will likely be going back to in the next few months, certainly by the fall, I think. And still working out the logistics of that and the plans around that, and how that will work, but that we can talk about that at another time. And so we're here at a time when there's a lot going on. I think all of us are holding in our hearts the tragedy down in Florida, the building collapsing, and the terrible loss of life there. And all of the, it's a different kind of suffering, but the suffering of mainly in the western part of of the US, maybe Canada as well, but the heat wave there, and connected, of course, with climate change, and so the suffering that goes with that. Where I think I saw it's they called it on the weather a 1,000-year, once in a 1,000-year event, and which in historical terms kind of gives it a context that having heat of this magnitude, but obviously it's going to has become something different than a once in 1,000 years, and more like once in a decade, or even once every few years. So just holding that as well, the truth of that, really, and what we might do, in the face of that, how we might respond. So today, there's the theme of the class, of the session is, I called it Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. Some of you may remember the song from 1980 or so, and it's really kind of looking for suffering as looking for happiness, looking for joy or peace in all the wrong places, and how suffering is really a kind of a mistake, really, a confusion. But I think what we'll do is we'll just have an initial meditation, maybe an arriving meditation, and then I'll share some reflections. We'll have more of a sit, and we'll have Emily lead us in some movement. And hopefully today, I think, have some small group sharing. So again, welcome to you all. And let's just maybe take a few minutes to arrive. If you like, you can close your eyes, bring your attention inward, and just maybe connecting with your body, feelings in the body. And notice if there's any area what you might be holding tension that you could relax. Maybe the shoulders, the chest, the belly, the facial muscles. letting yourself arrive and settle, letting the chest be open so you can breathe easily, relaxing the shoulders. You might take a few longer, deeper breaths to help you settle and arrive. Nice full deep in breath, relaxing, letting go on the out breath. Breathing in, inviting a sense of calm to the body and the mind. And as you breathe out, calming the body, calming the mind. Letting the breath settle into its natural rhythm whenever you're ready. Breathing in, breathing out. And consciously taking this time to be present for whatever is here for our experience. Remembering the words of Martha Postlethwaite's poem, Clearing. She says, do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. The sense of consciously creating a space in our lives, a space to be present, to be open to whatever is arising in the body, in the heart, in the mind, and meeting it with kindness, with acceptance, without pushing it away or judging it, making it different. Just this moment without judgment. And out of the stillness, the silence, and the conscious intention to be present may arise some insight, some kindness that we can bring back into our world, into our lives, so that we consciously create this space, this clearing in our lives. Bringing and cultivating an attitude of acceptance and of kindness to whatever is present for you in the body, emotions, the mind. Whatever's here right now, can it be held with kindness, met with kindness? It's making space for whatever is here. You may find it helpful to cultivate an anchor for your awareness, a part of your experience, or an object that you focus your attention on, excuse me, to help ground you here now in this moment. And for many, our own breathing is a very helpful focus for attention. Just to be aware of the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. Letting the breath be really in the foreground of our awareness. We'll still be aware of the sounds around us, maybe bodily feelings, thoughts that come up, but letting the breath be there at the center. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, knowing you're breathing in. And breathing out, knowing you're breathing out. And when the mind goes off, as it will, sometimes it's frequently, sometimes it's more periodically, we can just, when we notice the mind has gone off into planning or daydreaming, worrying, remembering, whatever kind of thinking it is. We just gently and kindly incline the mind back to the breath, back to the body. In breath and out breath. Each time we go off and we come back again, that coming back is a strengthening of this faculty of attention. It's not like we're failing meditation when we get lost in thought. Just acknowledge the thinking as a natural process of the mind, and then consciously, intentionally coming back, building this faculty of attention, strengthening the pathways in our brain that help us remember to be here, to come back. It's meeting whatever is present right now with kindness, with acceptance. Beginning again in any moment. We can always come back. You know, the mind's been off in stories or plans somewhere else. No matter how long we've been gone for, just come back right now. What am I aware of? Recognizing what's here and allowing it to be here, to come and to go in its own time. Peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. As Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. This is Walk Slowly by Dana Folds. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still. And just like that, something in me settles, softens, makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper, and I remember again that life isn't a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we were born for. As many times as I forget, catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going, that many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe, to be, and walk slowly into the mystery. So taking your time coming back into the collective space, or kind of outward looking, being here together. Welcome everyone again if you joined us. Good to see everyone. Good to be together. Good to see you, Kevin and Adrian, and others we haven't welcomed. Tum Don, welcome Bettina. To see you, and Jeff, and welcome everyone. Peggy, Paul, Judy, Leslie, Eileen, Sharon, Shazzy, and Bethesda. Good to see you. And Rich, and Margaret, Francine, and Henry, Mira. Kerry Mara, good to see you. I think you're in New Jersey, right? Am I right? Everyone. So welcome everyone. I mentioned a little earlier that the theme today is is looking for love in all the wrong places, and want to just share a few reflections this morning on suffering. You know, we talk a lot about suffering, and really about, I think, the reason I think we're all here. We might frame it in different words or different language, but I think we all want to be freer than we are, or find some degree of less stress or suffering in our lives, less difficulty, fewer challenges, or perhaps better put, ways of working with the challenges of life, because life will always bring challenges. It's not like we're trying to get rid of the challenges or the difficulties, but is there a way that we can find peace, that we can be at peace, perhaps joyful, in the midst of it all, you know, in the midst of what the Taoists call life's 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. You know, with the sorrows will be part of life. We're not asking for, I don't think, or expecting everything to be roses every day and all the time. But as these teachings point to, we can work with, you know, whatever is arising, and as I'll be talking about today, the way we relate to our experience plays a really tremendously important role in our well-being, in our happiness, in our ways of working with stress and difficulty and suffering and all of that. So I want to share some reflections on that today. And I'd like to begin with a story. This is from the what's called the Yogacara Bhumi Sutra. These was a text that was translated from either Sanskrit or Pali back about 1700 years ago, and around the end of the 200s of the current era. And it's a story about some kids building sandcastles. So I'll share this with you. Some children were playing beside a river. They made castles of sand, and each child defended his castle and said, "This one is mine." They kept their castle separate and wouldn't allow any mistakes about which was whose. When the castles were all finished, one child kicked over someone else's castle and completely destroyed it. The owner of the castle flew into a rage, pulled the other child's hair, struck him with his fist and bawled out, "He spoiled my castle. Come along, all of you, and help me to punish him as he deserves." The others all came to his help. They beat the child with a stick and then stamped on him as he lay on the ground. Then they went on playing in their sandcastles, each saying, "This is mine. No one else may have it. Keep away. Don't touch my castle." But evening came. It was getting dark, and they all thought they ought to be going home. No one now cared what became of his castle. One child stamped on his, another pushed hers over with both hands. Then they turned away and went back, each to their home. I find this a kind of an interesting, I think a helpful story from a Dharma perspective. You know, we can kind of think of these kids and maybe laugh at them, a kind of, you know, children taking their sandcastles so seriously, but and you know, being willing to fight each other and defend their castles, and then at the end of the day, the castles, you know, don't mean anything to them. You know, and think of that. Oh, it's you know, children, you know, getting caught up in their, you know, what they're caught up in. But it speaks to me very much of what we all do. You know, we create our sandcastles, you know, the things that are really important to us, and we hold on tightly to them. We defend them, we protect them, and we suffer when we do. You know, the kind of, you know, in Buddhism is spoken about as craving and clinging. We get caught up in craving and clinging. We want what we want. We want to push away what we don't like, and we suffer. You know, and it's certainly not just children that that do this. That this is a kind of a way. You know, I think all of us, until we see that there's another way, that we get caught up in. We get caught up in craving and clinging and aversion. Somehow it reminds me a little bit of a story. It was actually a cartoon I remember from probably about the time of Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places, about 1980. I was being a teaching assistant in UCLA and doing my graduate work, and I remember a cartoon in a textbook. It was a cartoon of an image of a man, and he's in a bottle, and there's another man outside of the bottle, laughing at the guy in the bottle. But then you see that the guy who's laughing is himself in a bottle. And the first reaction, I think, mine was to laugh at the guy laughing at the guy laughing in the bottle. And then you suddenly kind of look behind you and kind of wonder where the bottle might be around us, you know, that this is something we all do, that we all get stuck, we all get caught up in craving, in clinging, and in suffering. And we talk a lot in Buddhism about suffering. You know, the Buddha's Four Noble Truths are all about suffering, aren't they? You know, the existence of suffering, the cause of suffering being craving, clinging, not seeing things as they really are. And the end of suffering, the possibility of ending suffering in our lives, and the path to the end of suffering. So it's all kind of focuses around this notion of suffering. And as you may know, the word in the Pali language, which is the first language that the Buddha's teachings were written down in, about 5 centuries after his death, Pali. The word in Pali is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A, dukkha. And dukkha is normally translated into English as suffering, you know, and I think in many ways, and many people have pointed this out, that suffering isn't a great translation of this word, of this Pali word, excuse me, this Pali word dukkha, which has both, in a way, suffering is too big and generic a word, and doesn't actually capture, you know, the notion of or the different notions of dukkha. When we think of suffering, we tend to think about, I think, something like, you know, a war or conflict or a, you know, great tragedy. But there are situations where there may be, you know, great suffering in the way that we experience it, the way we understand it, that may not, in fact, always fit with, you know, may not always be experienced as suffering in the Buddhist sense of the word. It may not be held as suffering, may not be experienced in that way. So suffering isn't a great word as a translation of this word, dukkha. I like the translation. The word it's a clunkier word, but the word unsatisfactoriness. It's a sense of unsatisfactoriness or dissatisfaction in what we're experiencing. I think we all know, like, we don't like something, we don't like the way things are. Even that may not capture all of the aspects of dukkha. One teacher, Tony Bernhard, meditation teacher, Dharma teacher, gave a list of synonyms for dukkha, and this can be helpful to think of it as not just one thing. She said one is suffering, another is pain, unease, discontent, unsatisfactoriness, unhappiness, affliction, anxiety, dissatisfaction, discomfort, anguish, stress, misery, frustration. Probably you could add another 14 on top of this 14 that capture, you know, different elements of this, things not being the way we want them to be. One teacher, Tanisaru Bhikkhu, affectionately known as by his birth name Jeff, Tan Jeff Thanissaro Bhikkhu, uses the term stress. Again, stress has limitations because we have all of our current day understandings of stress and stress reduction and all of that. So again, stress isn't perfect either, but it's one sense of, that sense of being under pressure, of not experiencing something that's unpleasant, that's difficult. Whatever word or words we use, what's crucial on the Buddhist path is really to understand dukkha, to understand suffering, to understand what we call suffering, to understand unsatisfactoriness and how it operates in our lives. Because it's only by understanding dukkha, understanding suffering, and our relationship to suffering, that we can find an end to dukkha, an end to suffering, and realize deep peace, deep happiness and well-being, the deepest possible freedom in this life. It's only through understanding our suffering, because if we don't understand it, and we don't understand the possibility of working with it, and actually ultimately of letting go of it, then it's likely we're just going to continue just in the cycle of suffering. It'll just keep going on because we don't even realize that it's suffering and that it's something that we can do something about. I knew somebody, as a lovely, lovely man who got, excuse me, who was dying. I mean, I knew him for a while, and dying of liver poisoning. And, it seemed very clear that his, liver was giving out from having, spent most of his adult life, at least, drinking alcohol quite heavily. And I remember, visiting him, in the last weeks, I think, of his life. And there was a sense of, this relatively young man in his, excuse me, in his, I think at the time in his 50s. And there was this kind of like, why is this happening to me? And yet there seemed like there was a very clear causal connection between the life that he'd lived and, his relatively early death, or, impending death. But there was a sense of, of not quite understanding. And again, I say, I share this not in any way of a judging place, but just sometimes we don't recognize cause and effect very clearly. We don't recognize, the way that our actions, and sometimes our thoughts and sometimes our words, but often our actions are actually perpetuating suffering in our lives, are keeping it going. And hence we don't really attempt to make change in our lives, that we carry on doing something because, well, it's familiar. There's maybe some feeling of comfort in doing it because of the familiarity of doing it. So we don't make change. We don't really realize that there's suffering involved, that there is this experience of perhaps unsatisfactoriness, wanting things to be different than they are, wanting to avoid something that we're feeling or experiencing. So I want to just share a little bit about dukkha, about suffering, and I want to continue talking about it this next week as well. But 2 or 3 things I want to highlight about suffering and how we experience it. The first is that we all experience suffering until we find a way out of it. I don't believe that anyone has ever lived without experiencing dukkha, not just pain. Clearly, we all know that, excuse me, pain is inevitable. We bang our elbow or we bump into something, we're going to experience pain. Nobody, has any doubts about that, and will experience pain in different ways in our lives. But not just the pain of life, but just this sense of unsatisfactoriness that often goes with pain, but it goes with other experiences as well. The dukkha, the suffering that comes from wanting things to be different. We all experience it. It can be the suffering of addiction or of anger or of fear or of hatred, where we're wanting things, wanting something we don't have. That feeling of I've got to have something. And there's an unsatisfactoriness in that. There's a sense of suffering in that. I'm not okay with the way things are right now, because I need to have this thing. I need to have this shiny gadget. I need to have a different job. I need to be, in a relationship or out of a relationship. I need things to be other than they are. Or we're not liking things the way that they are. Things need to be different for me to be okay. I need to have what I like, or I need to get rid of what I don't like. Any of these experiences really are expressions, are forms of suffering. They can be more gross, more obvious, more painful, as with addictions, or when hatred or fear get really solidified. But it can be just everyday things as well. It could be like being stuck in a traffic jam. Now, there's not anything inherently suffering about being caught in a traffic jam. It may be you're just driving and there's an accident, or there's a great deal of traffic, and things have come to a standstill or slowed down. There's nothing inherently suffering about being in a traffic jam. If you're feeling okay and you don't have anywhere else to go, can just be happy being there, in your car. Presumably you're not, too hot or too cold or, whatever, nothing painful happening. This is just how it is. But often when we're in traffic, we don't like it. We want things to be different. There's some story in our mind that, no, I need to be somewhere. I'm in a hurry. And so therefore there's a gap between the way things are. I'm here in traffic, not moving very quickly, and I'm wanting to be somewhere else. And in that gap, there's this unsatisfactoriness, there's this suffering. It's not the traffic itself that's causing suffering. I mean, it's a condition, but it doesn't inherently bring suffering. It's just, it's just like, a strong wind or a hot day. It's just how life is showing up, how conditions are showing up. There's nothing inherently suffering about it, nothing inherently suffering about being, it being a very hot day. There may be some, some physical discomfort, but there's not the suffering. The suffering comes when we're somehow in a relationship of wanting things to be different, where there's a gap between, typically a gap between how things are and how we want them to be or think they should be. They say on the London Underground, mind the gap. It's a good Dharma reminder as well. Mind the gap between how things actually are and how we want things to be. Because where there's a gap there, we'll be experiencing suffering, we'll be experiencing dukkha. So we could say with dukkha, with suffering, with unsatisfactoriness, that we're actually looking for happiness in all the wrong places. You know, it could be the suffering of I want to be in a different job. I don't like the job that I have. I want a different job. Or this person, I want this person to be different. Or this situation, this traffic jam, or this, you know, this boring meeting that I'm in, that story of it being a boring meeting. I'm wanting this to be different. We're thinking that if this person were different, if this person wasn't bothering me, if they weren't being judgmental or critical or whatever we might be interpreting what they're saying or doing to be, or if this situation were different, or this thing were different, I'd be happy. If only I had a job I liked, or a relationship, or a different my financial situation, or my health were better, then I'd be happy. So we think of our happiness, of our peace, of our well-being as connected with this often external situation. If only this person were different, this situation were different, or if only I had this. But when we do this, when we look for our happiness in this way, in wanting conditions to be other than they are, then we're going to suffer. There'll be suffering, there'll be dukkha, there'll be unsatisfactoriness. You could say we're actually barking up the wrong tree. Or as Regina said when she taught the class a few weeks ago, she used the metaphor of climbing up the wrong ladder. You know, we're looking for love in all the wrong places. We're looking for happiness where it's not really the question of the suffering isn't in whether we get or we don't get the thing or the situation to be the way we want it to be. It doesn't require the thing to change. The key to understanding suffering is that the key lies within us, because our dukkha, our suffering, our unsatisfactoriness isn't dependent fundamentally on the object, on the thing or the person or the situation, but it's on our relationship to the person or the thing or the situation. How am I relating to this? How am I relating to this traffic jam? How am I relating to this person who's, you know, being too slow in serving the customers in the line, you know, the assistant in the shop, you know, that I might be feeling annoyed with? Oh, why are they being so slow? Or why is this person in front of me being so slow? Or why is this driver, you know, not moving more quickly? You know, we think that the problem is with that. If that would change, then I'd be okay. You know, and if it did change, then maybe we would for a moment or two be okay until the next situation came along and we would repeat the same sense of suffering, unsatisfactoriness. Why are they doing it? Why is everybody doing these things to make life difficult for me? Why is the world doing it for me? So we create these stories in our minds. This should be different. I want this. I don't want this. I like this. I don't like this. And we get caught up in our experience in this way. The key really is in our relationship to our experience. The suffering, the dukkha, is in the relationship. And if we want to really find greater freedom in our life, if we want to find more well-being, more happiness, more peace, we have to turn our attention towards our relationship with the situation or with the person, the thing that we're annoyed with or we're wanting or whatever. There's a something that the Tibetan teacher Minga Rinpoche shared. He said, ultimately, your happiness depends on choosing between the discomfort of being aware of your mental afflictions and the discomfort of being ruled by them. Ultimately, your happiness depends on choosing between the discomfort of being aware of your mental afflictions and the discomfort of being ruled by them. So in the situation of the traffic jam or the person that's not doing what we want them to be doing or whatever, we can choose between being aware of, oh, I'm really tense here. I'm really tight. I'm thinking how much I want this situation to be different. Okay, can I bring awareness to that situation? And if I bring awareness to it, to how I'm feeling this resistance in my body, in my thoughts, in my emotions, I'm getting angry. These thoughts are, proliferating about how this should be different. If I can bring awareness to that, then I can find my way out of this difficulty, this tangle, this unsatisfactoriness. But if we don't do that, then we just continue to act out the old habits and patterns, whether it's reacting to this person or the next person, this traffic jam, the next traffic jam, this relationship, the next relationship. We'll think that we need to solve, the problem externally. If I change my relationship and get into another relationship, then I'll be happy. But as we know, the problem, very much of the time isn't in this person should be different. It's very often, it's not to say that the person is perfect or that they're doing exactly, what they should be doing, whatever, or even that they're acting wisely or compassionately. But our suffering, the key really is our suffering is in our relationship to our experience. You think of a situation of, if we're addicted as an extreme example of suffering, of dukkha, where we think getting the drug or the drink or whatever we're addicted to will relieve our suffering. But the problem, we can't, it will never relieve the suffering. The problem was never fundamentally with the drink or the drug, but with the craving. There's some need that we're wanting to meet, some way we're wanting to be happy, but we're, barking up the wrong tree. We're thinking that the happiness will come from getting the drink, getting the drug, getting this person to change, getting this situation to change. So if we're going to end our suffering, we don't end it by changing the situation. Sometimes we need to change things in our lives, certainly. But fundamentally, as long as they're clinging, we need to look at that relationship, at that craving, at that aversion, at that wanting things to be a certain way. So the key is in the relationship itself rather than in the object. The problem is when we're caught up in suffering, we're hooked. Pema Chodron, beloved Tibetan Buddhist teacher, speaks of, uses the Tibetan word Shenpa, which really means being hooked. We all get hooked. When we're suffering, we're really hooked. And the nature of being hooked is to experience a sense of unsatisfactoriness, wanting things to be other than they are. And what's key to finding our way out of suffering is to recognize that the problem with the unsatisfactoriness is not in the thing itself or in the situation, but in this being hooked, in being really caught on a hook of suffering. I want to share a few things from something she wrote about Shenpa. Here's an everyday example of Shempa. Somebody criticizes you. She criticizes your work or your appearance or your child. In moments like that, what is it you feel? It has a familiar taste, a familiar smell. Once you begin to notice it, you feel like this experience has been happening forever. That sticky feeling is Shempa, and it comes along with a very seductive urge to do something. Somebody says a harsh word, and immediately you can feel a shift. There's a tightening that rapidly spirals into mentally blaming this person or wanting revenge or blaming yourself. Then you speak or act. The charge behind the tightening, behind the urge, behind the storyline or action is Shempa. So Shempa is another term really for this suffering, this clinging, this wanting, this being hooked, this dissatisfaction. She says, now if you catch Shempa early enough, it's very workable. You can acknowledge that it's happening and abide with the experience of being triggered. It always comes back to just being willing to be with our experience, the experience of urge, the experience of wanting to move. It's like experiencing the yearning to scratch an itch. And generally we find it irresistible. Nevertheless, we can practice patience with that fidgety feeling and hold our seat. In these moments, we can contact the underlying insecurity of the human experience, the insecurity that is inherent in a changing, shifting world. As long as we're habituated to needing something to hold on to, we'll always feel this background rumble of slight unease or restlessness. We want some relief from unease. So when Shempa arises, we go on automatic pilot. Without a pause, we follow the urge and get swept away. So what we need to do is really we need to bring awareness to that unsatisfactoriness, to that suffering, to that dukkha. And we have to own the suffering. We're involved in the suffering. We're implicated in our suffering. And I say that not as a blaming or judging thing. It's something we all do. We get caught up. But when we notice, we just pay attention. This is the first noble truth. We pay attention to that feeling of suffering, that feeling of wanting things to be different, that feeling of unsatisfactoriness. And when we can stay with that feeling, then we see that staying with that feeling is really the first step of finding our way out of suffering. Being willing to open to the craving, to the clinging, to wanting things to be a certain way. And rather than going outward to try and solve the problem, we stay with the experience. We open to it with kindness, with acceptance. In this way, we can find our way out of dukkha by staying with the cause of the dukkha, the cause of the suffering, which is the craving, is the wanting, is the clinging. So where is your dukkha? You know, is there dukkha? Is there unsatisfactoriness in this moment? In these days, in these times? Is there a way that you typically get caught up in dukkha? What's calling for attention? All of us, as I said earlier, all of us get caught up in this until we've completely let go of suffering. We're all working with this manifestation, this expression of the different expressions of suffering. And if we can make that U-turn from looking outward to say, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? To turn inward, to say, what do I need to open to? What do I need to work with in order to find release? And then if we can do that, we can find a deep-rooted release that really digs up the roots of the suffering rather than solving the problem externally, which will typically just change the symptom. We might change one addiction for another addiction, but we're still addicted. We still have that that clinging, that craving that perpetuates the addiction, that perpetuates the suffering. So I'm going to be talking more next week about the path really to ending the dukkha, particularly the Buddha's eightfold path. And I'll be looking at how to untangle the tangles of our lives. But maybe we'll stop here for now, invite Emily to lead us in some movement, and then we'll come back and have another sitting. Well, we'll have some sharing together in another sitting. Thank you. Thank you, Emily.
Good morning. Let me invite you all to open up into the space around you, standing and noticing your feet. Just swinging your arms from side to side. And then open both arms out wide, opening up your chest, drawing in your shoulder blades. And with your palms up, reach up and gather the energy of the sky, the sunlight, and the day-blind stars, and bring that to your heart. And then gather the energy of this community, the kindness and compassion here, the attention and awareness, and bring that to your heart. And then gather the energy of the earth, that which provides so much abundance, and bring that to your heart. And then come out into cactus arms, elbows bent, arms, forearms facing up. Inhale. Exhale, tilt down. Inhale, rise. Exhale, tilt. And inhale, rise up. And then lengthen your arms up, grasping your left wrist in your right hand. And tilt over to the right, extending out, lengthening, and up. Switch hands and tilt over, out to the left. And then bring both hands back to center. Draw your hands in prayer position to your heart. And then flip your hands down. And with an exhale, just go whoosh. Once again, drawing that center line to your heart. Turning your hands down. And whoosh. Float your arms down, move your shoulders independently. Doing your own dance. And then move them the other way. And then gather your hands behind your back. Inhale in neutral. Well, inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, draw your hands below your waist, engaging your shoulder blades, opening the chest. And then bring them back to your waist. Again, inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, draw the arms down below your waist and back to your waist. Last time, inhale, lifting up. Exhale, drawing your arms, lengthening, and back to your waist. Float your arms up just for a moment, floating in this space, and then move your shoulders together, back and forward. And the last move is a forward bend, bringing your hands above your knees. Come into a flat back. Think about your hips, drawing just a little bit beyond your heels. Inhale, lifting your head and chest. Exhale, allow your head and shoulders to drop down to wherever you might like. to where it's comfortable and safe. And just allow this moment, breathing in, breathing out. Again, a deep breath in, lengthening your spine. Exhale, soften. And then press on your feet. Bring your hands back above your knees and roll up your spine, your head last. Bring your hands to heart center and release to the sky. Release to us and to the earth.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks so much. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Please feel free to share in the chat anything, appreciation of your colleagues in the groups, or anything around them, what came up for you around the meditation or talk today. So we'll have that as our kind of more group sharing today. I do want to thank you to Heather and Kerry and Mark, raising the heartbreaking issue of the Indian residential schools in Canada and Saskatchewan, I think, and not far from where you are, Kerry, I think. It's devastating even to read about it. And my sense is that we may find the same here in the US in terms of similar treatment, because the same attitudes were going on, and it kind of has a feeling about a little like the clergy sexual abuse of children, and how when it came out, and then we find it's really worldwide. And so just holding the suffering of those who who've lost loved ones and who've lived through those experiences in our hearts today. Again, welcome back, everyone. What I'd like us to do is to move into a short final meditation. I want to share a few more words from Pema Chodron. That metaphor of Shempa, I find a really, really helpful one. That kind of like a sense of an itch that wants to be scratched, and it's really hard not to go there. She says, mostly we don't catch Shempa at an early stage. We don't catch the tightening until we've already indulged the urge to scratch our itch in some habitual way. In fact, unless we equate not acting out with friendliness towards ourselves, this refraining can feel like putting on a straitjacket, and we struggle against it. So kind of trying to stay in that kind of difficult space of like wanting to do something or wanting to push something away can be hard unless we can equate it with kindness to ourselves. And she says the best way to develop our ability to stay fully present with Shempa and to equate that with loving kindness is in meditation. This is where we can train in not getting swept away. Meditation teaches us how to open and relax with whatever arises without picking and choosing, which is really what we do in the practice. Welcoming the guests and opening to, the joys and the sorrows. She says it teaches us to experience the uneasiness and the urge fully, and to interrupt the momentum that usually follows. We do this by not following after the thoughts and learning to return again and again to the present moment. We train in sitting still with the itch of Shempa and with our craving to scratch. I think that's a really, really good image. You know, it's not just obviously physical itches and urges, but it's all sorts of wanting to do things, habitual ways that we move away from our present moment experience, because in suffering, that's really what we habitually do. We don't like the present moment, so we go for the drink or the drug or the food or the internet, or the binge watching or whatever it is, to help us not be with that feeling that is unpleasant, that's difficult, that's shempa, that's dukkha, that's unsatisfactory. So learning to stay is really so much at the core of this practice of just, can I be with this? Can I say yes to this? And maybe we say yes, and then the mind says no, and we go off again. We say, okay, can I say yes to the no and come back again, and make the space of holding the difficulties as large enough to hold whatever is here. So it can be holding the resistance, holding the frustration with trying to stay and not being able to stay, holding all of that, letting the kindness be large enough to hold the whole experience. And it's a training. And I'll talk more about it next week, about the training part of it, how we train the heart and mind, not just in meditation, but in cultivating wisdom and acting and living wisely in our day-to-day lives as well. So let's sit for a few minutes together. Again, just taking some moments to settle and re-arrive. Noticing what's here right now. Just breathing into being here. This moment without judgment. It's helpful to remember some of the practices we do, at the beginning of a meditation, how we can be supported by just taking a few deeper breaths, how it can help us kind of calm ourselves, re-arrive, just be present with what's here. Our breaths tends to be so much connected with other bodily experiences that if we're feeling some discomfort in the body or something that's going on we don't like, we tend to tighten the breath, to shorten it, disconnect from it. So just consciously coming back to the breath, maybe with a couple of longer, deeper breaths, can help us re-arrive, can help us settle again, relax back into being here. The smile can help relax the body and the mind, the nervous system. It's really an expression that right now this moment is okay. Just putting a hand on our heart can be a way of reconnecting with ourselves, bringing us back home to ourselves, home to our bodies, to our hearts, to this moment. Wishing ourselves well can be another way of stepping out of reactivity or a focus on what's wrong. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be held in loving kindness. filled with loving kindness. And coming back to gratitude, reflecting on some things we're grateful for can also help us step out of our focus on what we lack or what's wrong, what we think is wrong. Just come back and recognize what we have, what we can appreciate, what we often take for granted. You could just think of one or two things or people in your life. Just appreciate what you have. Might say a silent thank you. You can appreciate the gift of these practices, these teachings, the effect they have on our lives. Appreciate the gift of community, of Sangha, all of us waking up together. These final couple of minutes, keep breathing in, and as you breathe in, just send yourself a wish of kindness and compassion. Whatever word or phrase or words might most speak to you, resonate right now. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I be filled with loving kindness. And as you breathe out a wish of care, of kindness and compassion to all of us here, everyone here today in this class, wishing them well. May you be happy. May you be safe, free from harm. May you be held in loving kindness, filled with loving kindness. Breathing in kindness for yourself. Breathing out kindness, compassion to all of us here and out into the world, wherever your heart, your imagination may go right now. It may be to a particular group or individual, people suffering or living in conflict or difficulty. It might be to all beings. May you be safe. May you be held in loving kindness. want to share as we finish today, just an excerpt from Joy Harjo, a Native American poet and poet laureate, for calling the spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. Just a piece of this. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. We'll finish with some announcements. I just want to share a few things I have coming up. I'm going to post these in the chat, but I have 3 retreats that I'm teaching with Rebecca over the next year. Got one in 2 weeks called Heart Practices Weekend. It's an online retreat, and I'm sharing it in the chat. Also in the fall, an in-person retreat up in Pennsylvania, not too far from us, an hour and a half or 2 hours from DC, on 10,000 Joys and 10,000 Sorrows, opening to life. And then we're teaching a retreat in Ireland next summer in June 18th to 25th. I'm going to share the link to that. And also in the fall, I've got an 8-week course on the Noble Eightfold Path, walking the Buddha's Eightfold Path to freedom from suffering. So I'm sharing those in the chat. I'd love if you can join us for some or all of those. And just to share, as almost all of you know, there's no charge, no cost for this class. You're invited, if you're able to and inclined to do so, to make a donation. The donation or dana supports the teacher, in this case me, helps us to continue to offer these teachings, helps me to continue to teach. And we're really committed to keeping this practice of generosity or dana going. So thank you for your support in that way.